The Naval Special Warfare Command dining facility at Coronado Naval Base in San Diego, California was not a place where mistakes were made lightly. The low-ceilinged room carried the weight of 60 years of history in its walls. Photographs of fallen warriors lined the corridor leading to the entrance. Young faces frozen in time, forever vigilant, forever remembered. Unit insignias hung with reverence. Mission patches told stories that would never be spoken aloud in public. This was hallowed ground, and Lieutenant Commander Mackenzie Harrington knew it. She pushed through the double doors at precisely 12:30 on a Tuesday afternoon in early February, her digital tablet tucked under one arm, her cover removed and folded with military precision. The space was moderately crowded. Perhaps 30 operators scattered across tables, men whose bodies carried scars from places that didn't exist on official maps. The conversation was low, professional. The atmosphere was one of controlled power at rest. Mac had earned her place here. MIT graduate, top of her class at Naval Intelligence School, 3 years in signals intelligence, 2 deployments analyzing terrorist networks from operations centers thousands of miles from danger. She was being groomed for command. Everyone said so. At 35, she was on the fast track to make commander before 40, maybe captain before 50. She believed in systems, in algorithms, in the superiority of data over instinct. The future of warfare was digital, she knew. Artificial intelligence could process more information in seconds than a human could absorb in a lifetime. Satellite surveillance saw everything. Cyber operations could cripple nations without firing a shot. The old ways were dying, and Mac Harrington represented what would replace them. That's when she noticed the elderly woman. She sat alone at a corner table near the window where late morning sunlight streamed through salt-stained glass. She wore a faded navy cardigan that had seen better decades, its color bleached from countless washings and years of California sun. Beneath it, a simple white blouse. Her slacks were gray wool, pressed but worn. Her shoes were practical flats that looked like they had come from a department store clearance rack. Her hair was silver white, pulled back in a neat bun that couldn't hide the passage of time. Her face was deeply lined. Not the soft wrinkles of easy aging, but the kind carved by sun and wind and years beyond counting. Each crease told a story. Each line marked a price paid. Her hands wrapped around a simple bowl of chicken noodle soup showed the unmistakable tremor of advanced age. She was perhaps 80, maybe 82 years old, small, maybe 5'6", thin to the point of frail. The kind of elderly woman you would see at a grocery store, moving carefully down the aisles, checking prices, taking her time, representing no threat to anyone. And she was eating her soup with the serene patience of someone who had nowhere else to be and absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. Max stopped mid-stride. Her tactical mind immediately analyzed the situation. Family member brought on base for a visit, confused, wandered into the wrong building. It happened occasionally. Dependents getting lost during tours, taking wrong turns, ending up in restricted spaces. But something bothered her. Something wasn't right. The dining facility door was clearly marked. Bold letters, authorized personnel only, NSW Command, Naval Special Warfare. You didn't accidentally wander in here. You had to pass through security checkpoints, show identification to armed guards, intentionally seek it out. Mac's jaw tightened. In a post-9/11 world, in facilities where classified operations were planned and executed, security wasn't just important. It was paramount. One breach, one unauthorized person in the wrong place at the wrong time, could compromise operations, endanger lives, destroy missions that took months to plan. She walked over to the table with purposeful strides. Professional, confident, the way she had been trained. The old woman didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her approach. She just continued eating her soup with slow, methodical spoonfuls. Her trembling hands somehow steady enough to complete the simple task without spilling. "Excuse me, ma'am." Mac's tone was professional but firm, the voice of authority cultivated over a decade of service. "This galley is for operators only. Are you authorized to be here?" The old woman paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She looked up at Mac with pale gray eyes that seemed to take in everything and reveal absolutely nothing. They were the eyes of someone who had seen things, done things, experienced things that most people couldn't imagine. But in that moment, they showed only mild curiosity. "I'm having lunch, dear." The old woman's voice was soft, textured like old leather that had been left too long in the sun. There was a rasp to it, a roughness that spoke of decades breathing harsh air in harsh places. "I understand that, ma'am, but this facility is restricted to Naval Special Warfare personnel, Active duty and authorized civilians only. Do you have authorization to be here? I have soup. The old woman gestured at her bowl with the spoon. A simple statement of fact. No irony, no challenge. Mac felt a flash of irritation. She had been up since 0500, briefed an admiral on threat assessments, reviewed intelligence reports from 3 different theaters, analyzed patterns in enemy communications. She didn't have time for this, didn't have patience for someone who couldn't follow simple rules. Ma'am, I need to see your identification. Right now. The old woman set down her spoon carefully, as if it were made of crystal rather than steel. She reached into her cardigan pocket with trembling hands, a movement that took longer than it should, and pulled out a laminated card. She handed it to Mac without comment, without protest, without any visible emotion at all. Mac looked at it, her trained eyes scanning for relevant information. It was a Department of Defense dependent identification card, the standard kind issued to military retirees and their families. The photo showed the same weathered face she was looking at now, perhaps taken a few years ago, but still clearly the same person. The name read Evelyn Ann Blackwood. Date of birth, April 7th, 1942, 82 years old. Just as Mac had estimated. But there was something odd about the card, something that didn't quite fit. In the section where it normally listed the sponsor's branch of service and rank, it was blank. Just a dash, as if the information had been deliberately omitted or redacted. And in the section for access authorizations, there was a code Mac didn't recognize, despite her years of experience with military credentials. SAP/Theta-Black-1. SAP, Special Access Program. The highest level of classification, reserved for operations so sensitive that acknowledging their existence could damage national security. Theta, a compartment designation she had never encountered. Black, indicating what covert, historical retired. The number 1 suggesting either priority level or sequence. Mac's irritation overrode her curiosity. The code meant nothing to her in that moment. All she saw was an elderly woman with a dependent ID in a space reserved for operators. Someone who didn't belong. Mrs. Blackwood, this is a dependent identification card. This doesn't grant you access to operational facilities. You need to be escorted by active duty personnel at all times when in restricted areas. The old woman reached for her spoon again, her fingers closing around it with practiced ease, despite the tremor. I'm eating soup, dear. Ma'am, I'm asking you politely to come with me. We'll sort this out at the security office, verify your authorization, and get you to wherever you're supposed to be. I haven't finished my soup. The statement was delivered in the same quiet, matter-of-fact tone. No defiance, no challenge, just a simple truth. Mac's patience, already worn thin from a morning of bureaucratic frustration, finally snapped. She was a lieutenant commander. She had earned her rank through excellence and dedication, through 12 years of service in the most technologically demanding fields the Navy offered. She had briefed admirals, advised SEAL team commanders, identified targets that saved American lives. And this elderly woman, this civilian, was treating her like an inconvenience, like a minor annoyance to be ignored while finishing a bowl of soup. Ma'am, this is not a request. Mac's voice rose slightly, carrying across the dining facility with a sharp edge of command. Other SEALs looked over, conversation stopping mid-sentence, heads turning, eyes locking on the confrontation. This is a direct instruction. I need you to stand up and come with me. Now. The old woman continued eating her soup, didn't even look up this time. The spoon moved from bowl to mouth with the same steady rhythm, as if a lieutenant commander's order meant nothing, changed nothing, mattered not at all. Mac felt heat rising in her face. In front of 30 operators, men who needed to respect her authority in a field still dominated by masculine tradition. This elderly civilian was openly ignoring her. It was disrespectful. It undermined everything she had worked to build, every barrier she had fought to cross. She reached down and took hold of the soup bowl, not roughly, but firmly, moved it away from the old woman and set it on the adjacent table. I said now. The old woman looked at the empty space where her soup had been, stared at it for a long moment, as if trying to understand how something that had been there was suddenly gone. Then she looked up at Mac, and her pale gray eyes held something now. Not anger, not fear, not even surprise, something else, something harder to define, something that made Mac's absolute certainty waver for just a heartbeat, like a momentary crack in armor. Young lady, the old woman said, her voice still quiet, but carrying an edge now, a subtle shift in tone that changed everything. You should put that back. Or what? Mac kept her voice level. Professional. You'll report me, file a complaint, ma'am. You are in a restricted military facility without proper authorization. You are refusing to comply with lawful instructions from a naval officer. I could have the master-at-arms here in 2 minutes. I could have you escorted off base right now. You could, the old woman agreed, her voice carrying no challenge, just acknowledgement of fact. Then stand up. Last chance. The old woman stood slowly. Her movements were stiff, painful. The movements of someone whose body had been broken and repaired so many times that nothing worked quite right anymore. She was shorter than Mac had expected, maybe 5'5", possibly less with the stoop of age. Thin, frail-looking, the kind of elderly woman who should be tending gardens and baking cookies for grandchildren. But her eyes, those pale gray eyes, held something that didn't match the frail body at all. Something that whispered of capability, of competence, of danger restrained but not forgotten. Ma'am, Mac said, her voice harder now. Who do you think you are? The old woman was quiet for a long moment. The dining facility had gone completely silent. 30 operators watched, waited, held their breath. The old woman seemed to be considering something, weighing options, making a decision. Then in that rough whisper of a voice barely audible but somehow carrying to every corner of the room, they used to call me Wraith. The dining facility went absolutely, utterly silent. One of the SEALs at a nearby table, a Master Chief with 25 years of service, 3 deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, a chest full of medals and a face that had seen too much, went white as a sheet. His fork clattered to his plate with a sound like a gunshot in the silence. Mac didn't understand. The word meant nothing to her. Wraith. What kind of call sign was that? Ma'am, I don't have time for Lieutenant Commander. The Master Chief stood up fast enough to knock his chair backward. His voice was urgent, almost panicked. And this was a man who didn't panic for anything. Ma'am, you need to step back, right now. Mac turned to him, confused by the sudden intervention, by the fear she saw in his eyes. Master Chief Sullivan, I have this under... That's Commander Evelyn Blackwood. Sullivan's voice was shaking, actually shaking. Her call sign was Wraith. Ma'am, she's a legend. Mac looked at the old woman again, saw the same frail figure, the trembling hands, the weathered face, the discount store clothes. This woman is 82 years old. She can barely hold a spoon steady. She's exactly who she says she is. The voice came from the entrance to the dining facility, a voice that carried absolute authority. Every head in the room turned as one. Standing in the doorway was Admiral Nathaniel Frost, Chief of Naval Operations. 4 stars on each shoulder board gleaming in the fluorescent light. The highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy. The man who commanded over 330,000 active-duty sailors. The man whose decisions shaped naval policy and strategy across the globe. He was flanked by 2 aides in crisp uniforms and a civilian wearing a Pentagon security badge that indicated access to the highest levels of classified information. Frost walked into the dining facility with measured steps, his eyes locked on the old woman, on Evelyn Blackwood, on Wraith. His expression was one of absolute respect mixed with something else, relief perhaps, or vindication. Evelyn, Frost said, and his voice carried a reverence that was complete, the kind of respect that couldn't be faked or forced. I'm sorry I'm late. I was told you'd be here at 1300 hours. I should have known you'd arrive early. Some habits never change. The old woman, Wraith, nodded slightly, a minimal acknowledgement. Nathaniel, you didn't need to come personally. A phone call would have sufficed. Yes, I did need to come. Frost walked past Mac without acknowledging her, without even glancing in her direction, and stopped directly in front of Blackwood. You've refused every invitation for 40 years. Refused every ceremony, every medal presentation, every attempt to honor your service. But this one, Evelyn, this one was not optional. The Secretary of Defense himself signed the order. You're getting the recognition you've earned, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not. Max stood frozen, still holding the old woman's soup bowl, feeling the world tilt beneath her feet, feeling the ground shift and crack and open up to swallow her whole. Frost finally turned to look at her, really look at her, and in that gaze, Max saw her career hanging by a thread. Lieutenant Commander Harrington, his voice was ice. Why are you holding Commander Blackwood's lunch? Sir, I didn't know who she was. The words came out weak, pathetic, even to Mac's own ears. She didn't have proper authorization to. She has authorization that supersedes yours. Frost's voice cut like a blade. That supersedes mine. That supersedes everyone in this building. He gestured to one of his aides, who stepped forward with a leather folder stamped with classification markings. Frost took it, opened it, his hands steady, but his voice carrying weight of emotion barely contained. Commander Evelyn Ann Blackwood, retired, United States Navy, Naval Intelligence, 1963 to 1993, 30 years of service. He paused. Let that sink in. Call sign Wraith. Frost began reading from documents that Mac could see were heavily redacted. Black bars covering entire paragraphs. Whole sections obscured. Operational record classified at the highest levels for national security reasons. Confirmed missions, 73 deep cover intelligence operations across 6 theaters. Operations that officially never happened. Missions that violated international protocols and congressional oversight. Missions that saved American lives when our government denied those Americans even existed. He paused, letting the weight settle. Confirmed intelligence coups classified, but estimated conservatively that preventing 14 major terrorist attacks. 16 hostage situations resolved through her intelligence gathering. 3 major weapons smuggling networks dismantled. Frost's voice thickened with emotion. Awards and decorations. 2 Defense Superior Service Medals. 4 Legions of Merit. 7 Bronze Stars. 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in hostile territory. He paused. And a Defense Distinguished Service Medal that's being presented today. For contributions to intelligence operations spanning 3 decades. For pioneering techniques in human intelligence gathering that are still taught at every intelligence school in NATO. The dining facility was absolutely silent. 30 operators. Men who had seen combat themselves, who had faced enemy fire and made life or death decisions, stood in stunned silence. Commander Blackwood's call sign, Wraith, Frost continued, was given to her by enemy forces. They called her the ghost who sees everything in their intercepted communications. They feared her, not because she was violent, but because she was invisible. Because she extracted intelligence without them knowing she existed. And by the time they realized someone had been there, it was too late. The damage was done. Frost looked at Blackwood, who stood silently, her expression unchanged. When a Navy F-14 Tomcat was shot down over the Persian Gulf in 1986, and the pilot was stranded in hostile waters with Iranian Revolutionary Guard closing in, Evelyn Blackwood volunteered to accompany the SEAL rescue team. She was 44 years old, not combat trained, but she spoke Farsi, and she knew that pilot carried intelligence that could not fall into enemy hands. Frost's voice dropped. She took a bullet during that extraction, shielded the pilot with her own body, bought the seconds needed for the helicopter to get airborne. She saved his life. He paused. Let the silence stretch. I was that pilot, Lieutenant Nathaniel Frost, 28 years old, and I owe every day since then to the woman standing in front of you. Mac's knees felt weak. The soup bowl was still in her hands, growing cold, a physical reminder of her colossal mistake. Frost turned back to Mac, and his eyes were hard as stone. This woman is a living legend. The operations she ran shaped modern intelligence doctrine. The techniques she pioneered are still in use today. Her after-action reports have been studied by every intelligence agency in the Western world. He stepped closer. And you, Lieutenant Commander Harrington, just confiscated her soup and treated her like a vagrant who wandered in off the street. Sir, I apologize. I was wrong. Her identification card didn't show any of this information. It just had a code I didn't recognize. Her identification is classified at a level you don't have clearance to fully understand. Frost's voice was unforgiving. The access code on it requires special authorization just to read properly. It's compartmented information. SAP/Theta-Black. Do you know what that means? Max shook her head. Mute. It means Special Access Program, Theta Compartment, Black Legacy Status. It's a classification created specifically for intelligence officers whose operations remain so sensitive that acknowledging them could still compromise national security. 30 years after retirement, Evelyn Blackwood worked in places and with people who are still active, still in danger, still relying on the secrecy of operations she conducted decades ago. Frost moved closer to Blackwood, his voice softening. Evelyn, I apologize. This was not how today was supposed to go. This was not the welcome you deserved. Blackwood shrugged slightly, a minimal movement of her thin shoulders. It's fine, Nathaniel. The young officer was doing her job. Security matters. She saw something that didn't look right, and she acted. That's what she's supposed to do. That's what I would have done. It's not fine. You deserve respect. You've earned it 1,000 times over. Frost gestured to his aide. Get Commander Blackwood fresh soup, hot soup, and inform the ceremony coordinator that we'll be delayed by 30 minutes. I'm not starting until Commander Blackwood has finished her lunch properly, quietly, with the dignity she deserves. He pulled out a chair at Blackwood's table and sat down. The Chief of Naval Operations, four-star Admiral, the highest-ranking officer in the Navy, sitting down to have lunch with an 82-year-old woman in a discount store cardigan and worn slacks. One of the SEALs, a young operator, maybe 26, approached the table reverently, carrying a fresh bowl of steaming soup. He set it down in front of Blackwood with hands that trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from awe. Ma'am, the SEAL said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for your service, for everything you did, for all the lives you saved. Blackwood looked up at him, and for the first time Max saw something soft in those gray eyes. Thank you, son. Stay safe out there. Watch your six. Trust your training. Bring your brothers home. Yes, ma'am. I will, ma'am. Max still stood there, frozen like a statue, feeling like she had just stepped on a landmine that hadn't exploded yet but could at any second. Frost looked at her, really looked at her. Lieutenant Commander Harrington, sit down. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really an order. It was a statement of fact about what was going to happen next. Max sat in the chair across from Blackwood and Frost. Her uniform suddenly felt too tight, too constricting, like it was strangling her. Her chest felt hollow. You made a mistake, Frost said bluntly, his voice carrying across the table with brutal honesty. A significant one. You saw an elderly woman and assumed she didn't belong. You saw someone without rank insignia and assumed she hadn't earned respect. You saw someone who didn't fit your mental image of who should be in this space. And you judged based on appearance rather than investigating properly, rather than asking questions, rather than showing even basic curiosity about that classification code on her identification. Sir, I'm not finished. Frost's voice was hard, unforgiving. In 30 minutes, we're holding a ceremony in the Naval Special Warfare Command Auditorium. 200 personnel will be in attendance. The Secretary of Defense has authorized the declassification of certain aspects of Commander Blackwood's service record so that the special operations community can finally understand who she was, what she did, and why it mattered. Frost leaned back in his chair, his 4 stars catching the light. Commander Blackwood is being awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal today for her contributions to intelligence operations and doctrine, contributions that have saved countless lives over 5 decades. And most importantly, she's being publicly recognized after 40 years of refusing every honor, after 40 years of living in the shadows she operated in. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Mac. And you, Lieutenant Commander Harrington, just humiliated her in front of her brothers and sisters in arms. You treated her with disrespect in a place that should have honored her. Mac felt tears threatening. Her voice came out as a whisper. Sir, I understand. I was wrong. I should have. But, Frost said, and that one word hung in the air like a lifeline. Commander Blackwood has requested something different. She doesn't want you punished in the traditional sense. She wants something else, something more meaningful. Blackwood finally looked up from her soup, her pale gray eyes meeting Mac's. When she spoke, her rough voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with volume. Lieutenant Commander, I'm not angry. You were doing your job the way you understood it, but you need to learn something. Before you command more people, before you have more lives in your hands, before you make decisions that will affect hundreds of intelligence professionals. She set down her spoon carefully. You need to learn that rank doesn't automatically confer wisdom, that youth doesn't mean ignorance, and age doesn't mean irrelevance, that an old woman eating soup might have more to teach you than any algorithm you've ever programmed, any satellite you've ever tasked, any report you've ever analyzed. Blackwood's voice was gentle but firm. I want you at the ceremony today. I want you to hear my story. The real story, not the sanitized version. I want you to understand why humility matters in our profession, why assumptions are dangerous, why every person you meet, especially the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones who don't fit your mental categories, might be carrying knowledge you desperately need. Mac looked at this elderly woman, frail and trembling, who had just been revealed as a legend. Ma'am, I'm truly sorry. I was arrogant. I made assumptions based on appearance, and I disrespected you in a way you absolutely didn't deserve. Apology accepted, Blackwood said simply. She picked up her spoon again. Now, are you going to sit there feeling sorry for yourself, or are you going to ask me questions because you've got 30 minutes before the ceremony? And I've got 30 years of stories. Some of them might even be useful to a young officer who's just learned she doesn't know everything. Frost smiled slightly, the first break in his stern demeanor. That's Evelyn Blackwood, 40 years hiding from recognition, refusing every honor, but she'll still teach if someone's willing to learn. She's been doing it her whole life, can't stop herself. Mac felt something shift inside her. The shame was still there, burning like acid in her gut. But there was something else now. Opportunity, a chance to learn from her mistake rather than just be destroyed by it. Ma'am, Mac said quietly, may I ask, why Wraith? Why did they call you that? Blackwood took another spoonful of soup, chewed slowly, swallowed. Then she looked at Mac with those pale gray eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Because I was invisible, dear. For 30 years, I moved through hostile territories and enemy organizations like a ghost. They never saw me coming, never knew I was there. Only saw the results after I was gone. She paused. And because in our profession, being invisible is the greatest weapon you can possess. How many operations? Mac asked, leaning forward despite herself, drawn into the story. 73 confirmed missions that made it into classified reports. Probably another 20 or 30 that never got documented because they were solo operations in places we officially weren't. Blackwood's hands tightened on the spoon. The first one was 1969, Lebanon, before the Civil War, when things were just starting to fall apart. Frost stood. I'll give you two some time. I need to check on the ceremony preparations. He looked at Blackwood. Evelyn, take your time. The ceremony starts when you're ready, not before. He walked toward the exit, then paused, turned back to Mac. Lieutenant Commander, this is a gift. Don't waste it. When Frost was gone, the dining facility slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed in low tones, but every operator in the room was aware of the table in the corner, where a legend was having soup and teaching. Blackwood set down her spoon. 1969, she said, her voice taking on a distant quality, as if she were seeing something far away and long ago. I was 27 years old, fresh from Naval Intelligence School, the youngest female intelligence officer in the Mediterranean theater, and absolutely convinced I knew everything. She smiled slightly, a ghost of humor crossing her weathered face. I was about to learn how much I didn't know. Mac pulled out her tablet, instinctive, ready to take notes. No, Blackwood said gently. No devices. No recordings. Just listen. The way intelligence work was done before satellites and algorithms. Human to human. Story to story. Memory to memory. Mac put the tablet away, folded her hands on the table, and listened. Beirut, Lebanon. April 1969. Story 1, The Invisible Operator. Beirut, Lebanon. April 1969. The city smelled of jasmine and diesel fuel, of coffee brewed thick and sweet in copper pots, of the Mediterranean salt air mixing with exhaust from French motorcycles and American sedans. The Paris of the Middle East, they called it then, a cosmopolitan jewel where East met West in cafes and nightclubs and banks that held the wealth of nations. But beneath the surface, something was rotting. Evelyn Blackwood arrived at the American Embassy compound on a Tuesday morning with the spring sun already hot on her shoulders. 27 years old, Naval Intelligence School honor graduate, the youngest female intelligence officer assigned to the Mediterranean theater. She carried a single suitcase and a leather briefcase containing her orders. She was also carrying something else, something none of her male colleagues possessed. The absolute conviction that she had to prove herself worthy of being there. The embassy was a fortress pretending to be a building. Concrete walls disguised behind elegant stonework. Marines at every entrance with M16 rifles held in casual readiness. The cultural attaché's office on the third floor where she reported was actually the station for naval intelligence operations in Lebanon. Commander William Thatcher didn't stand when she entered. He was 52, career intelligence officer, 3 wars behind him. He looked at Evelyn the way a man looks at a problem he didn't ask for and doesn't want. Miss Blackwood, sir, you speak Arabic. Yes, sir, classical and Lebanese dialect, also French. How well? Fluently, sir. He grunted, slid a file folder across his desk. Christian militias are fortifying positions in East Beirut. PLO forces are consolidating in the south. Lebanese army is caught in the middle and fragmenting along sectarian lines. The situation is deteriorating faster than Washington understands. Evelyn opened the folder. Maps marked with colored pins. Intelligence reports. Surveillance photographs. We have a problem, Thatcher continued. The deputy chief of missions family. wife, and 2 daughters. They were visiting the American University campus yesterday. Tensions escalated. Militia checkpoints went up overnight. They're trapped in West Beirut. Can't get back to the embassy compound. Why not send Marines, sir? Because a Marine convoy would start a firefight. We need intelligence first. Safe routes, checkpoint locations, militia dispositions, and we need it in 12 hours. He leaned back. We have SEAL advisors on the ground, training Lebanese forces. Good men, but they stand out. 6-foot-tall Americans with crew cuts don't blend in Beirut. He paused. You, on the other hand, Evelyn understood. You want me to gather the intelligence. I want you to try. The SEALs think it's a waste of time. They think we should just punch through with force. But the ambassador wants to avoid an international incident. Thatcher's expression was skeptical. Prove them wrong or prove them right. Either way, we'll know. The SEAL liaison office was in the basement. 3 men in civilian clothes that didn't quite hide their military bearing. The team leader was a lieutenant named Raymond Cross, 30 years old, already a veteran of operations that would never appear in any official record. He looked at Evelyn the way Thatcher had looked at her, like a problem. Commander Thatcher says you're going to get our intel for us. I'm going to try, Lieutenant. With respect, ma'am, this isn't a training exercise. There are armed militias out there who would love to grab an American, especially a woman. I understand the risks. Do you? Cross's voice wasn't unkind, just skeptical. Because we've been doing this work for a while, and it requires a specific skill set. Then teach me what I need to know. Cross studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, you've got 4 hours to prepare. Then we move. They gave her clothing from the embassy's wardrobe of disguises. A simple dress, conservative, local style, a headscarf, practical shoes. They gave her a cover story, British nurse, working with the International Red Crescent, lost in the city when the checkpoints went up. They gave her a small camera concealed in a compact mirror, a map, a list of recognition signals if she needed emergency extraction. What they didn't give her was confidence. You don't have to do this, Cross said as the sun was setting. This is volunteer only. I know. The men who do this work, they train for years. I understand. Then why? Evelyn looked at him. Because those are American citizens out there. And because if I can do this, it proves that intelligence work isn't just about who's strongest or fastest. It's about who can be invisible. Cross almost smiled. Invisible, is that what you think you'll be? That's what I intend to be. She left the embassy compound just after sunset, walking, alone, her heart hammering against her ribs, her mouth dry, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But she kept walking. The streets of West Beirut were tense, armed men at intersections, cigarette smoke and diesel fumes, shouted conversations in Arabic, the rattle of automatic weapons being loaded and checked, the city preparing for violence that hadn't quite arrived yet. Evelyn walked with her head down. Her scarf arranged the way local women wore it. Not timid, but not challenging. The posture of someone who belonged, someone unremarkable. And they didn't see her. She moved through 3 militia checkpoints in the first hour. Each time young men with Kalashnikovs stopped her. Each time she spoke in Lebanese Arabic. Explained she was a nurse, trying to get to the Red Crescent station. Lost because the checkpoints had changed. Each time they waved her through, because she was invisible. Not through any exotic technology or elaborate disguise, but through understanding. Through knowing that the key to invisibility wasn't hiding. It was becoming exactly what people expected to see and then dismissed as unimportant. She mapped the checkpoints, photographed the positions with her compact camera, noted the militia affiliations by the flags and insignias they wore, counted the weapons, observed the patrol patterns, 6 hours of walking. Through neighborhoods that were preparing for war, past buildings that would be destroyed in the civil war that was coming, among people who had no idea their world was about to collapse. And nobody saw her. She returned to the embassy compound just before dawn, exhausted, feet blistered, but carrying intelligence that was current, accurate, and complete. Cross was waiting. He looked at the photographs she had taken, the maps she had marked, the detailed notes she had made. This is good work, he said finally, and there was no condescension in his voice now, just professional respect. This is very good work. The SEAL team used her intelligence to plan the extraction. They moved at 0400, 3 vehicles, civilian cars, taking the routes Evelyn had identified as having the lightest militia presence, avoiding the checkpoints she had marked as most aggressive. They reached the university compound, secured the deputy chief of missions family. and drove them back to the embassy without firing a shot. Zero international incident, zero casualties, zero diplomatic complications. Cross found Evelyn in the intelligence office the next morning. She was writing her after-action report, trying to make sense of what she had done, trying to understand why it had worked. "Lieutenant, we brought them home safe," Cross said. "Because of you, because of your intelligence." He paused. "I was wrong. I didn't think you could do it. I thought Thatcher was sending you as a political gesture. Prove that women could serve in intelligence roles. I thought you'd get scared and come back after the first checkpoint." "I was scared, Lieutenant. Terrified. But you did it anyway. That's courage. The real kind." He sat down across from her. "The men are talking about what you did, how you moved through that city like you were invisible, like a ghost. I just did what the situation required. No, you did what none of us could do, because you understood something we didn't. That invisibility isn't about camouflage or stealth. It's about becoming part of the environment. Unremarkable, expected, dismissed." Cross smiled. "One of the guys said you moved like a wraith, like you weren't really there. Just a shadow that people saw but didn't register." Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a sense of identity forming, of purpose crystallizing. "Wraith," she repeated softly. "If you don't mind the call sign, ma'am, it fits." She didn't mind because it was true. She had moved through hostile territory and hostile men had looked right at her and seen nothing worth noting, nothing worth remembering. Just another woman in a headscarf, just another nurse trying to find her way. And that invisibility had saved lives. Commander Thatcher called her to his office that afternoon. He was standing this time, and there was something different in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "The ambassador sends his thanks," Thatcher said. "The deputy chief of mission's family is safe because of your work. That's not a small thing." "I just gathered intelligence, sir." "You did more than that. You proved a concept, that human intelligence properly executed can accomplish what force cannot. That the right person in the right place with the right training can be more valuable than an entire battalion." He paused. "Lieutenant Cross tells me the SEALs want to work with you on future operations. They're calling you Wraith." "Yes, sir. The name fits. Keep it. Wear it. You earned it." Evelyn left Beirut 3 months later. By then, the situation had deteriorated exactly as the intelligence had predicted. The Civil War was beginning. The Paris of the Middle East was starting its long descent into chaos. But she had learned something there, something that would define her career for the next 3 decades. She had learned to be invisible. Story 2. The Persian Gulf Rescue. The dining facility at Coronado was silent except for Evelyn's voice. Mac listened, every word, every pause, every moment of that story from 1969. When Evelyn finished, she took another spoonful of soup, let the silence settle. "That was the first time," Evelyn said quietly. "The first time I understood what I could do, what I could become." "How many times after that?" Mac asked. "Many." Evelyn's expression was distant. "But the most important was 1986, because that's when I learned the pot." She set down her spoon, looked at Mac with those gray eyes that had seen too much. "Persian Gulf, Operation Earnest Will, the summer when everything went wrong." Persian Gulf, July 1986. The USS Kidd cut through water that was like glass. Destroyer, guided missile. Part of the American naval presence protecting Kuwaiti oil tankers during the Iran-Iraq War. On the bridge, the temperature was controlled, climate managed, but outside the Persian Gulf, summer was brutal. 120 degrees on the deck. Heat that turned steel too hot to touch. Air thick enough to choke on. Evelyn Blackwood stood in the intelligence center below decks, 44 years old. Commander, senior intelligence advisor to the task force, 23 years of service behind her. Operations in 15 countries. Languages including Farsi, Arabic, and Kurdish. She was studying reconnaissance photographs when the alert came. Aircraft down, F-14 Tomcat, shot down by Iranian surface-to-air missile over the Strait of Hormuz. Pilot ejected. Radar intercept officer killed on impact. Pilot in the water. Iranian Revolutionary Guard gunboats converging on his position. The pilot's name was Lieutenant Nathaniel Frost, 28 years old, fighter pilot. 3 years out of Top Gun, his entire life ahead of him, and he had approximately 90 minutes before the Iranians captured him. Evelyn ran to the bridge. The task force commander was already organizing a rescue. Helicopters, SEAL team, standard combat search and rescue protocol. But the numbers didn't work. Frost was 40 nautical miles from the nearest American ship. The helicopters needed 30 minutes to reach him. The Iranian gunboats would arrive in 20 minutes, maybe less. We need to delay them, Evelyn said. The commander looked at her. How? I'll go with the rescue team. If we encounter Iranian forces, I can negotiate. Buy time, I speak Farsi. Commander Blackwood, you're an intelligence officer, not a combatant. And Lieutenant Frost is carrying classified information about our air operations, mission profiles, electronic warfare capabilities. Iranian intelligence would consider him a priority target. Evelyn's voice was steady. I'm the only person on this ship who can speak to Iranian forces in their own language, who can deceive them long enough for us to extract our pilot. The commander studied her. You understand the risk. If the Iranians identify you as American intelligence, they'll want you more than they want Frost. I understand, sir. And if we're forced to abort, we can't guarantee extraction for both of you. I understand that too, sir. The commander made his decision. Get to the flight deck. The helo launches in 10 minutes. The SH-60 Seahawk helicopter lifted off in a storm of rotor wash and engine noise. Evelyn sat between two SEALs, combat equipped. Weapons ready, men trained for violence. She wore a flight suit and a helmet. No weapon, just a radio and her mind. The Persian Gulf stretched below them, impossibly blue, impossibly hot. The kind of water that looked peaceful from altitude, but could kill you in a dozen ways up close. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio. Contact. Visual on Survivor, 1 man in the water. Also contact on Iranian gunboats. 2 vessels, range 3 miles and closing fast. Evelyn keyed her radio. Put me down with the SEALs. I'll handle the Iranians. They found Frost floating in his survival vest, face burned from the sun, dehydrated, in shock, but alive. The SEALs pulled him into the helicopter with practiced efficiency, started medical treatment. And then the Iranian gunboats arrived, 2 patrol craft, fast attack boats, each carrying a crew of 8 and heavy machine guns. They pulled alongside, weapons tracking the American helicopter. The SEAL team sergeant looked at Evelyn. Ma'am, this is your play. Evelyn took the radio, switched to the frequency the Iranians would be monitoring, and spoke in Farsi. Iranian naval forces, this is civilian medical helicopter Alpha 7. We are conducting humanitarian rescue of civilian aircraft crash. No military action. Request you stand clear for safety. There was a pause, then a voice responded in Farsi. Suspicious, aggressive. This is Iranian Revolutionary Guard. You are in Iranian territorial waters. You will land immediately or we will open fire. Evelyn's mind raced. She needed to buy 8 minutes. 8 minutes for the helicopter to get beyond the range of the Iranian weapons. 8 minutes before Frost was safe. Iranian forces, we have critical medical emergency. Civilian pilots suffering from severe burns and dehydration. We request humanitarian corridor under international maritime law. The Iranian commander wasn't buying it. You are American military. You will comply or face consequences. The helicopter pilot looked at Evelyn, tense. Ma'am, they're arming weapons. Evelyn made a decision. Tell them our engine is malfunctioning. We need time to restart. Medical emergency requires immediate attention or patient will die. She switched back to Farsi, voice urgent. Iranian forces, we are experiencing engine trouble. We need 5 minutes to restart. Please, we have dying man aboard. Humanitarian consideration. There was a long pause. Evelyn could see the Iranian gunboat commander through the helicopter window. Young, maybe 30, making calculations, weighing orders against international law, against the propaganda value of showing mercy. You have 3 minutes, he finally said in Farsi. Then you will land on our vessel. 3 minutes, not 8. Not enough. The helicopter pilot was already moving, gaining altitude, turning toward international waters. But slow, making it look like mechanical trouble, like they were struggling. The Iranians watched, weapons still trained. 2 minutes passed. The helicopter was moving, steady, away from the gunboats. Then the Iranian commander realized the deception. American helicopter, you are fleeing. Stop immediately or we engage. The SEAL sergeant looked at Evelyn. Ma'am, we're not going to make it. They're going to fire. Evelyn looked at Frost, unconscious now, burns across his face, so young, his whole life depending on the next 60 seconds. She made her choice. Get him out, she said. Full speed, get him to safety. Ma'am, if we run, they'll definitely fire. That's an order. Get Lieutenant Frost to safety. I'll handle the Iranians. The pilot pushed the throttle forward. The helicopter accelerated, racing for international waters. And the Iranians opened fire. Heavy machine gun rounds stitched through the air. Tracer fire like angry hornets. The helicopter jinked left, right, evasive maneuvers. Evelyn felt the impact before she heard it, felt the punch of the bullet hitting her left shoulder, felt the hot spike of pain, felt the blood. She had positioned herself between the door and where Frost lay, had made herself the shield without even thinking about it. The SEAL sergeant was on her immediately. Pressure on the wound, emergency medical treatment. But Evelyn's focus was on the radio. Iranian forces, she said in Farsi, voice weak but clear. You have fired on humanitarian medical mission. We are civilian rescue. You have violated international law. This will be reported. The bluff worked. The Iranian commander hesitated, stopped firing. Because if this was truly civilian, truly humanitarian, he had just created an international incident. And in that hesitation, the helicopter crossed into international waters, beyond Iranian jurisdiction, beyond their weapons range, safe. The SEAL sergeant looked at Evelyn, her blood on his hands. Ma'am, you took a round for the pilot. Get him home, Evelyn whispered. That's all that matters. She woke up in the ship's medical bay 12 hours later, her shoulder bandaged. The bullet had gone through cleanly, muscle damage, but nothing permanent. She would recover. The first face she saw was Lieutenant Nathaniel Frost, standing beside her bed, his face still bandaged, but alive. Commander Blackwood, he said quietly, they told me what you did. You risked your life for mine. You took a bullet meant for me. I did my job, Lieutenant. No, ma'am, you did more than that. You saved my life, and I'll never forget it. I'll spend the rest of my career trying to be worthy of that sacrifice. Evelyn looked at him, saw the determination in his eyes, the debt he felt he owed. Then live well, Lieutenant. Serve with honor. That's all the repayment I need. Frost nodded. Yes, ma'am, I will. 38 years later, that lieutenant was now Admiral Nathaniel Frost, Chief of Naval Operations, the highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy, and he had kept his promise. In the dining facility at Coronado, Evelyn finished the story. Mac was silent, processing, understanding now why Frost had come personally, why he showed such reverence. He owed you his life, Mac said quietly. No, Evelyn's voice was firm. We served together. That's different from debt. He would have done the same for me. Would he? Evelyn smiled slightly. Yes, because that's what service means. You put others before yourself. You take the bullet, you buy the time, you do what needs to be done. She paused. That's the second lesson, Mackenzie. The cost of doing this work. Sometimes the cost is blood. Mac felt the weight of it, the reality of what Evelyn had done. Not in a simulation, not in a training exercise, in actual combat, with actual bullets. How did you keep doing it? Mac asked. After that, after being shot, how did you keep going into danger? Because the alternative was letting others go in my place. Others who couldn't do what I could do. Others who would die trying. Evelyn picked up her soup. But that's not the hardest part of this work, Mackenzie. The hardest part isn't when you succeed despite the cost. The hardest part is when you fail. She took a sip of soup. Gulf War, 1991. Let me tell you about failure. Story 3, the intelligence failure. The soup had gone cold again. Evelyn didn't seem to notice or care. She was somewhere else now, somewhere in the past that still caused pain. Kuwait, February 1991, Operation Desert Storm. Kuwait City, February 1991. The city was burning. Not metaphorically, actually burning. Iraqi forces retreating from coalition advance had set fire to oil wells. 600 fires. Black smoke that turned day into twilight. Air that tasted of petroleum and ash. Evelyn Blackwood was 49 years old. Commander, Senior Intelligence Advisor to Naval Special Warfare, 28 years of experience, dozens of successful operations. She was also tired. The Gulf War had been grinding for weeks. Intelligence Fusion Center operating around the clock. Reports coming from satellites, drones, human sources, trying to identify Iraqi command and control nodes, trying to locate Scud missile launchers, trying to stop the retreating Iraqi army from destroying Kuwait completely. The intelligence came in at 0300, multiple sources reporting an Iraqi command post in a building on the outskirts of Kuwait City. Senior officers, communications equipment, high-value target. Evelyn reviewed the intelligence. 3 separate sources. Corroborating details. Signal intercepts placing Iraqi military communications at that location. It looked solid. She wrote the assessment. High confidence, recommended mission to capture or destroy the command post. SEAL Team 5 was tasked. 12 operators, the best America had. They would insert at night, hit the building, capture or kill the Iraqi officers, destroy the communications equipment. The mission launched at 0100 the next morning. Evelyn was in the operations center, watching the radio traffic, listening to the team leader's calm voice reporting progress. Movement to target. Breach. Entry. Then, hold. This is wrong. This is not a command post. Evelyn's blood went cold. The team leader's voice again, strained now. We have civilians, women, children. This is a civilian shelter. Repeat, civilian shelter. We are aborting, exfiltrating now. The SEALs extracted without firing a shot. No casualties, no engagement, but the damage was done. Iraqi propaganda broadcast the story within hours. American commandos attacked civilian shelter. Women and children terrorized. The fact that the SEALs had immediately aborted didn't matter. The fact that they hadn't harmed anyone didn't matter. The perception was set. International media ran the story. Coalition partners demanded explanations. The White House was forced to issue a statement. And Evelyn knew it was her fault. She spent 3 days reviewing the intelligence, trying to understand what had gone wrong, trying to find where the failure occurred. And she found it, one of her sources. An Iraqi defector who had been providing intelligence for weeks. Good intelligence. Reliable intelligence. Except he hadn't defected, he had been turned by Iraqi intelligence, feeding her a mix of truth and lies, building credibility, waiting for the moment to cause maximum damage. The command post intelligence had been the trap, designed to make American forces look brutal, designed to break coalition unity, and Evelyn had fallen for it. She sat in her office that third night, alone, looking at the intelligence assessment she had written, her signature at the bottom, her recommendation. The knock on her door was quiet. The SEAL Team 5 commander, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane, tall, scarred, a man who had seen things that would break most people. Commander Blackwood. Lieutenant Commander, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. My intelligence was wrong. I nearly got your team killed. I nearly caused you to... Stop. Kane sat down across from her. You didn't nearly get us killed. We went in. We saw civilians. We left. Nobody died. Nobody got hurt. Except your pride. I failed you. No, ma'am, you made a decision based on the best information available. The intelligence was corrupted. That's not failure. That's war. I should have verified, should have questioned, should have what been perfect. Kane leaned forward. Ma'am, I've been doing this work for 16 years. I've seen intelligence officers who never admit mistakes, who cover up, who blame others. You're not doing that. You're taking responsibility. That's leadership. It doesn't feel like leadership. It feels like incompetence. The difference between competence and incompetence isn't whether you make mistakes. It's what you do after. Whether you learn, whether you build systems to prevent the same mistake twice. Kane stood. Don't quit, ma'am. We need you, especially after this, because now you know what failure feels like, and that makes you more valuable, not less. Evelyn didn't quit. She spent the next 6 months rebuilding her verification protocols, creating redundant source checking, establishing systems to identify when sources might be compromised, teaching other intelligence officers to look for the patterns she had missed. The systems she built were still in use today, still teaching new officers to question, to verify, to never trust a single source no matter how reliable they seemed. But the guilt never fully left. In the dining facility at Coronado, Evelyn's hands trembled as she spoke. Not from age, from memory. That was 33 years ago, she said quietly. And I still see those SEAL operators breaching that building. Still hear the team leader's voice saying, this is wrong. Still feel the moment when I realized I had failed them. Mac was silent, seeing Evelyn Blackwood not as a legend, but as a human being. Someone who had made mistakes, who had carried guilt, who had suffered. Why tell me this story? Mac asked finally. Because you need to understand something before the ceremony. Before you hear all the success stories. Before people talk about how many operations I ran. How many lives I saved. Evelyn looked at Mac with eyes that held pain that decades hadn't diminished. You need to know that I failed, that I made mistakes, that people almost died because of my errors. But you learn. You built better systems. Yes, but learning doesn't erase the failure. It doesn't take away the guilt. It just teaches you to carry it, to use it, to make sure you never make the same mistake twice. Evelyn leaned forward. That's the real lesson, Mackenzie. Not the successes, the failures. Because anyone can succeed when everything goes right. The question is what kind of officer you become when everything goes wrong. Mac nodded slowly, understanding. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing that, for being honest. Honesty is all I have left at 82. Evelyn finished her soup. And 30 minutes before a ceremony I don't want. Frost returned then, checking his watch. Evelyn, we should head to the auditorium. Everything's ready. Evelyn stood slowly, her body stiff, painful, the weight of 82 years evident in every movement. But her eyes were clear, her voice steady. All right, Nathaniel, let's get this over with. She looked at Mac. Come along, Lieutenant Commander. You wanted to understand who I was. Well, you're about to hear the official version. Just remember the unofficial version I told you. The failures, the kitam, the truth. Mac stood. Yes, ma'am. They walked toward the door. Evelyn, Frost, Mac, the legend, the Admiral. The student. Behind them, 30 operators stood in silent respect, a tribute to a woman who had served in shadows for 3 decades, who had bled for them, who had taught them what invisibility truly meant. Wraith was finally coming into the light, and the hardest part was yet to come. The auditorium was already filling when they arrived. 200 personnel, SEALs in their dress uniforms, intelligence officers in service dress blues, senior naval leadership with rows of ribbons that told stories of decades at sea. The room hummed with anticipation, with respect. These were warriors who understood what it meant to serve in silence, who knew the value of shadows. But before the ceremony, Evelyn had insisted on something. 3 more stories, 3 more lessons. In a small conference room adjacent to the auditorium, she sat with Mac and Frost and Master Chief Sullivan. The unofficial gathering before the official recognition. You've heard about success and failure, Evelyn said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. Now you need to hear about what comes after, about teaching, about impossibility, about legacy. She looked at each of them. These last 3 stories are the hardest to tell because they're about real cost, the kind that doesn't show on after-action reports. Story 4, Teaching the Skeptic Naval Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia, September 1997. The classroom smelled of coffee and dry erase markers. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 30 students sat in rows, most of them young officers fresh from their first deployments. Confident, tech-savvy, convinced they understood how modern warfare worked. Evelyn Blackwood stood at the front of the room, 55 years old, senior instructor, advanced interrogation and human intelligence techniques. She had been teaching for 2 years since transitioning from operational work. The work was satisfying in a different way than field operations. Passing knowledge, shaping minds, building the next generation. But some students made it harder than others. Lieutenant Bradford Calloway made it very hard. He sat in the front row, 26 years old, Naval Academy graduate with honors, master's degree in computer science from Stanford. Already served 1 deployment running signals intelligence operations in the Persian Gulf. He was brilliant, dedicated, and absolutely certain that human intelligence was becoming obsolete. Commander Blackwood, he said during the 3rd week of the course. His tone was respectful but challenging. With all due respect, ma'am, these psychological interrogation techniques seem outdated for modern adversaries. Evelyn had been writing on the whiteboard. She turned slowly, regarded him with those gray eyes that missed nothing. How so, Lieutenant? Modern adversaries are trained specifically to resist these methods. They've read the same manuals we have. They know the psychological tricks, the rapport building, the manipulation tactics. He gestured at his laptop. But they can't hide their digital footprints, their metadata, their communication patterns. We can extract more actionable intelligence from 30 minutes of technical analysis than from days of interrogation. Several students nodded, agreement rippling through the classroom like wind across water. They were the digital generation, raised on computers and smartphones. They believed in data, in algorithms, in the superiority of technology over human interaction. Evelyn set down her marker, walked to the front of her desk, sat on the edge with the casual posture of someone completely comfortable with herself. You believe technology has made human intelligence gathering less efficient, less reliable, more time-consuming. Calloway pulled up a slide on his laptop. Look at this case study from my last deployment. We identified a terror cell financing network by analyzing their cryptocurrency transactions. Took us 6 hours. Traditional interrogation of captured suspects took 3 weeks and yielded less actionable intelligence. And what happened to that terror cell? We disrupted their financing, froze accounts, prevented an attack. Did you capture the leadership? Calloway hesitated. Not yet, but we will. Their digital signatures are too distinct to hide for long. So the leadership remains operational, planning new attacks, adapting to your technical surveillance. Evelyn's voice was gentle, not confrontational, just factual. Technology told you what they did. It didn't tell you why. It didn't tell you what they'll do next. It didn't tell you how they think. We're developing predictive algorithms for that. Are you? Evelyn smiled slightly. All right, Lieutenant, let's test your theory. The room grew quiet, students sensing something was about to happen. Practical examination, right now. You've been given classified orders for a humanitarian mission. Standard scenario for intelligence officers. You've been captured by hostile forces. I have 30 minutes to extract those orders from you using only human interrogation techniques. No technology, no enhanced methods, just conversation. Mary Calloway's confidence was visible. And if you fail, ma'am, then I'll concede your point. I'll admit that my methods are outdated. That technology is superior. That this course should focus exclusively on technical intelligence. Evelyn paused. But if I succeed, you listen to every word I say for the rest of this course. You question nothing until you understand why. Deal. Calloway stood, extended his hand across the desk. Deal, ma'am. They shook. Evelyn gestured to a chair she pulled to the front of the classroom. Sit. The rest of you observe carefully. This is what human intelligence actually looks like. Calloway sat, crossed his arms, body language already defensive. He had read the resistance manuals, knew the techniques, name, rank, serial number, maintain silence, don't engage, don't reveal. He was ready. Evelyn pulled up another chair, sat facing him, not too close, not threatening, just two people having a conversation. And she didn't ask about the classified orders, didn't ask about the mission, didn't ask about anything operational at all. She asked about his father. Your father was Navy, wasn't he, Bradford? The use of his first name, informal, personal. Calloway blinked, caught off guard. Ma'am, that's not relevant to. Humor me, your father served. Submarines, if I remember correctly from your background file. A pause, then, yes, ma'am, 28 years. Retired as a commander. That's a distinguished career. He must be very proud of you. Following in his footsteps. Serving your country. I suppose so, ma'am. You suppose so? Evelyn tilted her head slightly. That's interesting phrasing. Not he is proud, just I suppose. Why the uncertainty? With respect, ma'am, this isn't part of the exercise. Everything is part of the exercise, Bradford. Every word you choose, every hesitation, every micro-expression. Evelyn's voice remained gentle. Conversational. Your father wanted you to follow him into the submarine service, didn't he? Carry on the family tradition. Silent service. The boats. The brotherhood. Calloway's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He mentioned it. But you chose intelligence instead, surface warfare qualification, then intelligence specialization, a completely different path. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just engaged. Why? I wanted to serve in a way that matched my skills. Computer science, data analysis, modern warfare. You wanted to prove you could succeed in a field your father didn't understand, where his experience didn't give you an automatic advantage, where you could be Bradford Calloway, not just Commander Richard Calloway's son. The classroom had gone completely still, every student watching, seeing something they hadn't expected. Calloway's voice was quieter now. That's not entirely inaccurate. You have a younger brother, don't you, Timothy? 23 years old, still in college, struggling. How do you, your background investigation, your social media privacy settings that aren't as private as you think, your girlfriend's Instagram posts about family dinners where your father talks about his two sons and their different levels of achievement. Evelyn's expression softened. You love your brother, but you feel guilty about being the successful one, the favorite, the one who makes it easy for your father to make comparisons. Calloway's face had paled. Ma'am, this isn't about the mission. But it is about the mission, Bradford, because the mission you were given isn't combat. It's not what your father would consider real Navy work. It's humanitarian assistance, flood relief in Southeast Asia, medical support, infrastructure repair, helping people. Something shifted in Calloway's posture, a slight relaxation, almost invisible, but Evelyn saw it. You're proud of that mission, she continued, not because it's glamorous, not because it will earn medals, but because it's what you believe service should be. Helping people who can't help themselves. Not just fighting, not just destroying, building, healing, making things better. She glanced at her watch. The target area is the Mekong Delta region. 6-week deployment, 15 personnel, medical specialists, engineers, logistics support. You're the intelligence officer responsible for local threat assessment and cultural liaison, making sure the team stays safe while they do good work. Evelyn leaned back. 21 minutes, Bradford. I just extracted your entire mission profile without asking a single direct question about it. I did it by understanding what motivates you, what you fear, what you value, what you're trying to prove to a father who may never fully understand your choices. The room erupted, not in sound, but in sudden comprehension. Every student seeing the demonstration for what it was, a masterclass in human intelligence. Calloway sat motionless, stunned. I never told you any of that. Yes, you did, with every word you chose, every hesitation, every micro-expression, every shift in body language. Evelyn stood, addressed the full classroom. Technology can tell you what someone did, where they went, who they contacted, what websites they visited, what they purchased, but only human intelligence can tell you why. She walked back to the whiteboard. An algorithm can process data. Only a human can understand another human's story, their motivations, their vulnerabilities, their truth. Evelyn looked at Calloway. You're a brilliant officer, Bradford. Your technical skills are exceptional, but you're trying to prove something to a father who served in a different era. Don't let that drive you into believing new technology means old wisdom is worthless. The best intelligence officers use both, human insight enhanced by technical capability. That's the future, not one or the other. Calloway stood slowly, extended his hand again, but this time it was different. This time there was real respect. I was wrong, ma'am. I'll listen. I'll learn. They shook hands, and Evelyn saw something in his eyes. Not just respect, understanding. The beginning of wisdom that came from being humbled, not with force but with truth. In the conference room at Coronado 27 years later, Evelyn took a sip of water. Bradford Calloway is now Deputy Director of the National Security Agency. He visited me last year, brought his children, told them about the day an old instructor taught him that human connection matters more than any algorithm. He's built AI systems to assist interrogators, not replace them, to amplify human intelligence, not substitute for it. That's legacy. Teaching someone not just techniques, but philosophy, principles that last decades. Mac leaned forward. What happened with his father? They reconciled 2 years later. Bradford invited him to a ceremony where he received a commendation for the humanitarian mission. His father saw the impact. The lives saved, the communities rebuilt. Understood that his son's service was different but equally valuable. Evelyn paused. Sometimes teaching means helping people see themselves clearly, so they can help others see clearly too. That's the fourth lesson, she continued. Teaching isn't about lecturing, it's about demonstration. About showing people what they can't see themselves. About challenging assumptions, not with argument, but with proof. She looked at Frost. But sometimes teaching happens in the most dangerous places, when you're not teaching on purpose, when you're just trying to survive. Story 5, The Impossible Infiltration. Iraq, Fallujah. November 2003. The city was a powder keg wrapped in barbed wire. American forces held the perimeter. Insurgents controlled neighborhoods. Civilians trapped between two opposing forces, both claiming to protect them. The Second Battle of Fallujah was still months away, but everyone knew it was coming. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Evelyn Blackwood was 61 years old, officially retired since 1993, 10 years of gardening in San Diego. Reading, trying to find peace after 40 years of service in shadows. Then came September 11, 2001. Everything changed. The call started within weeks, from the Pentagon, from Langley, from former students now in senior positions. They needed experience, needed wisdom, needed people who understood how to operate when systems failed and chaos reigned. She had ignored most of them. She was retired, done. She had given enough. But this call was different. Colonel Rashid al-Takriti, former Iraqi intelligence officer. Saddam, loyalist. The man had knowledge of weapons programs, chemical stockpiles, biological agents, the kind of intelligence that could save thousands of lives or, if used by insurgents, cost thousands more. He was hiding in Fallujah, protected by insurgents. 17 buildings in a residential compound. Hundreds of civilians living their lives amid the preparations for war. The SEALs were ready. SEAL Team 3. Warriors who had proven themselves in Afghanistan and Iraq, But they needed one thing: exact location, which building, which floor, which room. Without that intelligence, they would have to search every building, expose themselves to ambush, risk civilian casualties, create the kind of incident that would hand propaganda victory to the insurgents. Drones couldn't see through concrete. Signals intelligence captured nothing because Al-Takriti was too smart to use communications. Thermal imaging showed hundreds of heat signatures but couldn't identify the target among them. Technical intelligence had failed. They needed human intelligence, someone on the ground, inside the compound. Evelyn proposed something that made the CENTCOM commander pause mid-sentence. "I'll go in." The conference call went silent. Pentagon officials, special operations leadership, intelligence commanders, all processing what they had just heard. "Commander Blackwood, you're 61 years old, retired for 10 years. This is an active combat zone with insurgents who would kill or capture any American they identify." "I'm aware of all of that, sir. We cannot authorize." "Then don't authorize it. I'm a civilian consultant. If I volunteer for a high-risk operation, that's my choice." Evelyn's voice was calm, certain. "You need someone inside that compound, someone who can move freely, someone the insurgents won't see as a threat." "I can do that." "How about? Because insurgents don't see 61-year-old women as threats. Because I can pose as a humanitarian worker, international medical charity. Because I'm invisible in ways your operators can't be. Because I speak Arabic fluently. Because I've been doing this work since before most of your operators were born." The military commanders objected. Too risky, too dangerous, unacceptable if it went wrong. But the intelligence commanders understood. Sometimes the oldest tactics were the best. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage. 3 days later, Evelyn was in Iraq, embedded with a genuine humanitarian organization, Doctors Without Borders. They needed protection, needed someone who could navigate the chaos, who could speak the language, who could help them do their work safely. She became their translator, their cultural liaison, their invisible guardian. The convoy entered Fallujah on a morning gray with dust and diesel smoke. 3 vehicles, medical supplies, volunteers from 6 countries, doctors and nurses risking their lives to help people caught between opposing forces, and one 61-year-old American woman who looked like somebody's grandmother, who moved with the careful stiffness of someone whose body hurt, who smiled politely and spoke Arabic with an accent that sounded vaguely European. Dutch maybe, or Belgian. The insurgent checkpoint stopped them. Young men with Kalashnikovs and suspicious eyes. They demanded identification. Asked questions, searched the vehicles. One of them looked at Evelyn, really looked, saw an old woman in conservative dress, gray hair covered, face lined with age, hands that trembled slightly. "What are you doing here, grandmother?" Evelyn responded in Arabic. "Helping people, young man. The same thing your mother would want you to do." He smiled, waved them through. Because what threat could a grandmother possibly pose? She spent 4 days in that compound, working in a makeshift clinic, bandaging wounds, distributing medicine, boiling water to sterilize instruments, doing the unglamorous work that kept people alive. And while she worked, she watched. Which buildings had guards? Which had reinforced doors? Which had men who deferred to someone unseen inside? She memorized faces, patrol patterns, security protocols, guard rotations. She noted everything and forgot nothing. On the 3rd day, she saw him, Colonel Rashid Al-Takriti, for exactly 32 seconds, crossing from Building 11 to Building 7, flanked by bodyguards, moving quickly, but not quickly enough. She saw his face, matched it to photographs she had memorized, confirmed identity with the kind of certainty that came from 40 years of practice. Building 11, 2nd floor, east side, 3 guards, reinforced door, window facing the courtyard. She transmitted the intelligence through a coded message embedded in a medical supply request. 3 mundane sentences about needing more antibiotics and bandages, but the word choices, the sequence, the specific items, all contained the intelligence SEAL Team 3 needed. They received it 6 hours later, began planning the raid, but then the situation deteriorated faster than anyone expected. An insurgent commander became suspicious of the foreign aid workers, started asking pointed questions, demanding more detailed identification, threatening detention for anyone who couldn't prove their credentials. The charity coordinator made the decision: evacuate, leave immediately, before someone got hurt. Evelyn had approximately 4 hours before her cover was completely blown. 4 hours before insurgents discovered that the Dutch grandmother was actually American intelligence. 4 hours before they came looking for her with violence in mind. She sent an emergency signal, embedded in a request for extraction assistance, abort medical cover, require immediate departure. The response came back encoded in a supply manifest. SEAL Team 3 launching raid, O300, all personnel extracted during operation. 5 hours. She had to survive for 5 hours in a compound full of insurgents who were starting to ask questions they shouldn't ask, starting to look at the aid workers with suspicion instead of indifference. She spent those 5 hours in the clinic, treating a young girl with an infected wound, teaching the girl's mother how to clean and dress it properly, showing patience and care and complete calm while every nerve in her body screamed warnings. The raid came precisely on schedule. Helicopters, the distinctive sound of rotors beating air, then explosions, breaching charges, the controlled violence of professionals doing dangerous work. Evelyn hit the floor, covered the young girl with her own body, protected civilians the way her training demanded even in the middle of extraction. A SEAL appeared in the clinic doorway, night vision goggles, body armor, weapon ready. He swept the room, identified threats, found none. Evelyn spoke in clear English. Building 11, second floor, East Room, HVT confirmed on site. 3 guards, reinforced door. The SEAL nodded once, spoke into his radio, moved on. 12 minutes later, the team had Colonel Al Takriti in custody, zip-tied, hooded, being carried to the extraction helicopter under suppressing fire. The raid was successful. 0 American casualties. 3 insurgent guards killed. The target secured, and Evelyn was walking calmly to the helicopter with the other aid workers, helping them, reassuring them, maintaining her cover until the absolute last second. One of the younger volunteers, a French nurse named Marie, looked at her in the helicopter, had to shout over the rotor noise. "How are you so calm? We could have been killed." Evelyn smiled, patted her hand. "I've seen worse, dear. These soldiers are very professional. We were never in real danger." The SEAL team leader removed his helmet later, back at the forward operating base, looked at Evelyn with something approaching disbelief. "Ma'am, you were 61 years old in an active combat zone, surrounded by insurgents, and you stayed calm for 4 days, gathered the intel we needed, waited for extraction. That's exceptional. That's experience, son. 40 years of it." Evelyn accepted a bottle of water, and the understanding that sometimes being old is the best disguise, because nobody expects a grandmother to be dangerous. "Did you ever feel afraid?" "Every single second." She took a long drink. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alert. The trick is not letting it control you, not letting it show. Colonel Al Takriti was interrogated over the following weeks, provided intelligence that prevented 2 major attacks on American forces, led to the capture of 15 additional high-value targets, gave locations of weapons caches that saved lives, all because a 61-year-old woman had been invisible in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. In the conference room at Coronado 21 years later, Evelyn looked at Mac with eyes that had seen too much and remembered everything. That's the 5th lesson, the hardest one. Sometimes doing the work means putting yourself in danger. Real danger. The kind where you might not come home, and you do it anyway because you're the only one who can, because others will die for certain if you don't take the risk. "You could have died," Mac said quietly. "Yes, I accepted that before I got on the plane to Iraq, made my peace with it." Evelyn paused. "But I also knew that if I didn't go, the SEALs would have to search that compound building by building, and some of them wouldn't come home. Young men with families, with futures. So the calculation was simple. Risk one 61-year-old woman who had already lived a full life, or risk a dozen 25-year-old warriors who hadn't. That's not how command sees it." "No, but that's how I saw it. And I was the one making the choice." Evelyn stood slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the ocean. "Every operation I survived, every risk I took, every lesson I learned, all of it dies with me. I don't pass it on. That's why I'm here today. Not for recognition, for teaching. One final time." Story 6. The Legacy. Evelyn turned back from the window. Her expression was different now, softer, more vulnerable than Mac had seen. "The hardest story," Evelyn said quietly, "is the one about what you leave behind." She sat down again, hands folded in her lap, the tremor more visible now, age showing through the strength she had maintained all day. "I retired for real in 2010. Not recalled this time. Actually finished. 68 years old. 47 years of service if you count all the times they pulled me back. Time to stop. Time to rest. Time to be just Evelyn Blackwood instead of Wraith. Her voice was soft, reflective. My husband died in 1986. Navy pilot, shot down over the Persian Gulf 2 months after he saved Lieutenant Frost. His name was James Blackwood. We had been married 22 years, no children. We kept saying we'd start a family after the next deployment, after the next operation, after things settled down. She smiled sadly. Things never settled down, and then he was gone, and I was alone. Frost reached across the table, put his hand over hers. I never knew, Evelyn. I'm sorry. You were 28, fighting to survive. You had no way of knowing. She squeezed his hand. I don't regret the service, either of us. We knew the risks, accepted them. But there's a cost to this life, a price you pay in relationships, in connections, in the family you don't have because you're always somewhere else, always in shadows, always invisible. Mac felt the weight of those words, the loneliness beneath them. When I retired in 2010, I thought I would find peace. Garden, read, maybe volunteer somewhere, be a normal person for the first time in my adult life. Evelyn's expression shifted. But young officers kept calling, former students, people I had trained or worked with, asking questions, seeking advice, requesting mentorship. And I couldn't say no, because I looked at them and saw myself at 25, at 35, at 45, brilliant, dedicated, making mistakes I had made, heading toward failures I had experienced. And I thought if I could just share what I learned, if I could just teach them to avoid my errors, maybe it would be worth something. She looked at Mac directly. Over 14 years, I mentored 52 officers, some in person, coffee shops in San Diego, long walks on the beach, some remotely, emails, video calls, some for months, some for just a few crucial conversations when they were facing decisions I had faced, mistakes I had made. Each one left changed. I like to think better, wiser, more capable. They went on to senior positions, station chiefs, intelligence commanders, analysts who shaped policy, operators who saved lives. Evelyn's hands trembled. 3 months ago, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected. A commander I had never met, but who had studied my career, read every declassified report, analyzed every available technique, built an entire teaching curriculum around methods I had pioneered. She looked at Mac. That was you, wasn't it? You didn't know what I looked like, didn't know I was still alive, but you studied what I had done, used it to teach others. Mac nodded, voice thick with emotion. Yes, ma'am. For 3 years, I thought you were dead. Most intelligence officers do. No records after 2010, no obituary, nothing. So I assumed you had passed. But your work, your techniques, they were too valuable to let die with you. And that, Evelyn said softly, is what legacy really means. Not what you accomplish yourself, but what you teach others to accomplish after you're gone. What they teach others after they were gone on. Knowledge passed down and wisdom compounded, each generation standing on the shoulders of the one before. She stood, walked to her bag, pulled out a worn notebook, leather cover cracked with age, pages yellowed. This is 50 years of notes, observations, techniques, lessons learned, mistakes made. I've been adding to it since 1969. Every operation, every failure, every success, every moment when I understood something new about human nature. Evelyn handed it to Mac. This is for you, not because you've earned it yet, but because you will. Because you have the humility to learn, the dedication to serve, the wisdom to understand that teaching matters more than personal glory. Mac's hands shook as she took the notebook. Ma'am, I can't. You can, you will. And someday when you're 82 and someone young and brilliant makes assumptions about you, you'll add your own notes to that book, your own lessons, your own failures and successes, and you'll pass it on to someone else who needs it. Tears streamed down Mac's face. Thank you for this, for today, for everything. Evelyn cupped Mac's face gently, the way a grandmother would, the way someone who understood loneliness would comfort someone else facing the same path. Don't thank me yet. Read it, learn from it, use it. That's all the thanks I need. Frost stood. Evelyn, it's time. The ceremony is starting. 200 people are waiting to honor you. Let them wait a little longer. Evelyn looked at Mac, Master Chief Sullivan, even Frost. I need to say something before we go in there. Before they read all my accomplishments and pin medals on my cardigan, and make me into something I'm not. She took a breath. I am not a hero. I'm a person who did it, who made mistakes, who got people hurt sometimes, who failed more often than the official record shows, who spent 40 years being invisible and now realizes that invisibility had a cost, not just for me, but for everyone who came after. Everyone who didn't know what was possible because I was hiding. So today I become visible, not for recognition, not for glory, but for every young officer who needs to know that women have been doing this work successfully for 60 years. That age doesn't mean irrelevance. That experience matters. That the old ways still work when combined with new capabilities. That human intelligence will never be obsolete because humans will never be obsolete. She looked at each of them. That's the sixth and final lesson. Legacy isn't about you, it's about them. The people you teach, the wisdom you pass on, the knowledge that outlives you. I'm 82 years old. I don't have much time left. But if what I teach today helps even one officer make a better decision, save one life, prevent one failure, then these 40 years of hiding, these 40 years of refusing recognition will have been worth it. Master Chief Sullivan spoke for the first time, his voice rough with emotion. Ma'am, there are SEALs alive today because of intelligence protocols you created, techniques you pioneered, systems you built. You've already saved more lives than you'll ever know. Then let's make sure those systems outlive me, that the knowledge doesn't die when I do. Evelyn straightened her cardigan, adjusted her posture. All right, Nathaniel, let's get this ceremony over with. They walked to the auditorium together, but before they entered, Frost pulled Evelyn aside. There's one more thing, a demonstration, if you're willing. What kind of demonstration? A problem that's been plaguing Mac's team for 3 weeks. Russian GRU officer, captured, crossing from Mexico. We believe he's advanced reconnaissance for a cyber operation. But he won't talk. Multiple interrogators have failed. Evelyn looked at Frost. You want me to try? Only if you want to, but it would show them, really show them, that everything you've been teaching is real, current, applicable today. Where is he? Secure holding 20 minutes from here. We could delay the ceremony. No, Evelyn's voice was firm. After the ceremony, after the recognition. I'll do it then, because that's the lesson. Service doesn't end when they pin medals on you. It continues as long as you're capable, as long as you're needed. The ceremony. The auditorium erupted in applause when Evelyn entered. 200 personnel standing, SEALs in dress uniforms, intelligence officers, senior leadership, all showing respect before a single word was spoken. Frost escorted her to the stage, helped her up the steps. The small kindness of understanding that 82-year-old knees didn't work like they used to. He stood at the podium, 4 stars gleaming, the most powerful naval officer in the world about to honor someone most people thought was dead. Today we recognize a warrior who served in shadows for 5 decades. Commander Evelyn Ann Blackwood, United States Navy. Retired. Call sign Wraith. He read her record. 73 confirmed missions, 16 hostage situations resolved, 14 terrorist attacks prevented, operations in 6 theaters across 5 decades. He read her awards, 3 Purple Hearts, 7 Bronze Stars, 4 Legions of Merit, 2 Defense Superior Service Medals, and then the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the highest peacetime military decoration, for extraordinary service to national security, for contributions to intelligence doctrine that changed how America gathered information, for pioneering human intelligence techniques still in use today. Frost pinned the medal to Evelyn's cardigan, stepped back, saluted her. She returned the salute, slowly, the muscle memory of 40 years never fully gone. Then she stood at the podium, looked out at 200 faces, warriors who understood sacrifice, who knew the cost of service. I didn't want this, she began, her voice quiet but carrying in the hushed room. For 40 years I refused recognition, refused ceremony, refused visibility, because my power was invisibility, and I was afraid that being seen would take that away. She paused, but I was wrong. Admiral Frost showed me that, because invisibility has a cost. When I hide, when warriors hide, the next generation doesn't know what's possible, doesn't know the techniques that work, the wisdom that endures, the mistakes to avoid. I look out at this room and I see the future, young officers with capabilities I never dreamed of, technology I don't fully understand, potential that staggers me. And I realize that my job isn't to compete with you, it's to teach you, to share what 5 decades taught me, so you can be better than I was, so you can avoid my failures, so you can build on my successes instead of starting from zero. Her voice strengthened. This medal isn't for me. It's for every intelligence officer who served in silence, every operator who died without recognition, every person who put mission before glory. This represents all of them, all of us, the invisible warriors who kept America safe while the world never knew we existed. And this ceremony isn't an ending. It's a beginning. Starting today, I'm done hiding. Starting today, I teach, I share. I make sure that when I'm gone, the knowledge doesn't die with me. That's what service means. Not accomplishing great things yourself, but enabling others to accomplish even greater things after you are gone. She looked directly at Mac. Lieutenant Commander Harrington made a mistake today. She judged me by appearance, treated me without respect, made assumptions. Evelyn smiled. But when confronted with her error, she listened, she learned, she changed. That's what makes a great officer. Not perfection, but the humility to admit mistakes and grow from them. She's going to be better than I ever was, because she has my lessons, plus her own experience, plus technology I never had, plus a generation of officers around her who will push her to be even better. Evelyn's voice filled with quiet pride. That's legacy. That's what outlives us. Not monuments, not medals, but the people we teach, the wisdom we pass on, the knowledge that compounds across generations. The applause was long, genuine. Not polite recognition, but real appreciation for truth, spoken plainly. The demonstration. 2 hours later, Evelyn sat in a secure interrogation room. Across from her sat Captain Dmitry Volkov, Russian GRU, 42 years old, hardened intelligence operative, arms restrained, face defiant. Mac and Frost watched through one-way glass. Evelyn didn't speak for a full minute, just looked at him, really looked, reading body language, micro-expressions, the tiny tells that revealed character. Then she spoke, in Russian, fluent, unaccented, perfect. Hello, Dmitry. You must be very lonely. He blinked, surprised. I have nothing to say to you, grandmother. I didn't ask you to say anything. I said you must be lonely, far from home, no family, no friends, just interrogators who see you as an intelligence source, not as a person. She paused. How is your mother? His expression flickered. Barely, but Evelyn saw it. My mother is none of your concern. Elena Volkova, 76 years old, lives in Moscow, widow. Your father was Colonel Sergei Volkov, Army Intelligence. Died 5 years ago. You've been trying to be worthy of his legacy ever since. How do you? Because I can read your story in your face, in your body language, in the way you react to certain words. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. You're not here for ideology, Dmitry. You're here because you're trying to prove something. To a father who died thinking you hadn't accomplished enough. To a mother who worries you'll die like he did, alone, in service to something that won't remember your name. His jaw tightened, but something in his eyes shifted. Your father spent 30 years in intelligence, recruited sources, ran operations, sacrificed everything for Soviet Union. Then Russia. He died in a hospital bed with only his service medals and his regrets. No family around him because they were all strangers by then. He had pushed them away, chosen the service over connection. Evelyn's voice softened. And you're following exactly the same path. Aren't you choosing mission over mother, over relationships, over being human? Because you think that's what honor requires. You know nothing about honor. I know everything about honor and about the cost of misunderstanding it. She leaned back. I'm 82 years old, Dmitry. I served for 47 years. I sacrificed everything. My husband died while I was on deployment. I never had children. I have medals and commendations and achievements. And you know what I have at home? An empty apartment, a garden I tend alone, books I read by myself. Her eyes glistened. I was so busy being honorable, being dedicated, being wraith, that I forgot to be human. Forgot to build connections that lasted. Forgot that service means nothing if you end up dying alone with only your operations to remember. Why are you telling me this? Because I see myself in you, Dmitry, 40 years ago. Convinced that sacrifice meant giving up everything, that honor meant choosing duty over humanity. And I don't want you to wake up at 82 and realize you made the same mistakes I did. Silence. Heavy. Emotional. Your mother doesn't care about your mission. She just wants to know you're safe, that you'll come home, that you won't die like your father alone. Evelyn paused. When was the last time you told her you love her? Volkov's eyes were wet. 3 years. Call her today. Tell her you love her. Tell her you're scared sometimes. Tell her you're human. Evelyn stood slowly. That's worth more than any intelligence you're protecting. If I talk, I betray my country. If you don't talk, you betray your humanity. Your mother will bury you like she buried your father, with honor and medals and crushing loneliness. Is that the legacy you want? More silence. Volkov's breathing was unsteady. The operation, he said finally, voice barely above whisper. Reconnaissance for critical infrastructure cyber attack, targeting power grids, Pacific Northwest. 8 months in planning, designed to demonstrate vulnerability, not to kill, just to frighten, to show that Russia can reach into American homeland whenever we choose. Evelyn nodded slowly. Thank you for trusting me with truth. Why should I trust you? Because I just gave you something none of your interrogators did. I saw you, not as an intelligence source, but as a person, as someone's son, as someone who's lonely and frightened and trying to prove something that can never be proved to a father who's already gone. She walked to the door, knocked. It opened. I'll arrange for you to call your mother, Evelyn said. Tell her you love her. Tell her you're alive. That's the only mission that really matters. She stepped out. Frost and Mac were waiting. How did you do that? Mac breathed. 45 minutes. 3 weeks of interrogators failed, and you got him to talk in 45 minutes. I didn't interrogate him. I understood him. I showed him what his future looks like if he keeps choosing service over humanity. I showed him my mistakes so he could avoid them. Evelyn looked tired, truly tired now. And now I really need to go home. No more demonstrations, no more teaching, just rest. Epilogue, 6 months later. Naval Intelligence School, Dam Neck, Virginia. Captain Mackenzie Harrington stood at the front of a classroom, recently promoted, new assignment, senior instructor, teaching the next generation. On her desk sat Evelyn's worn leather notebook, 50 years of handwritten notes, observations, techniques, lessons learned through blood and sacrifice. On the wall behind her, she had hung a quote, "Intelligence is not about gathering secrets. It's about understanding people. Technology tells you what they did, only humanity tells you why." Commander Evelyn Blackwood, U.S.N. retired. Call sign Wraith. 30 students sat in front of her, young, eager, convinced they understood how modern intelligence worked. Before we begin, Max said, I want to tell you about a woman who changed how I understand our profession. Her name was Commander Evelyn Blackwood. Most of you have never heard of her. That's intentional. She spent 50 years being invisible. But what she taught me in one day taught me more than 4 years of formal schooling. She opened the notebook. Today I'm going to share 6 stories, 6 lessons, 6 truths about intelligence work that you won't find in any manual or algorithm. These are lessons bought with blood, tested in combat, proven across 5 decades of operations. A young lieutenant in the front row raised his hand. Ma'am, with respect, shouldn't we focus on modern methods, AI-assisted interrogation, predictive analytics, quantum encrypted communications? Max smiled. She had heard the exact same objection in Evelyn's classroom 27 years ago. History repeating. We'll cover all of that, Lieutenant. Every technological tool you mentioned. But first, you need to understand the foundation. The principles that don't change even when technology does. She paused. Because in 40 years, your AI will be obsolete. Your analytics outdated. Your encryption broken. But human nature, that's constant. Understanding people, that's eternal. She began to read from the notebook. Evelyn's handwriting. Elegant despite decades of age. Beirut, Lebanon, April 1969. I learned to be invisible. Across the country in San Diego, California, an 82-year-old woman tended her garden. Pruning roses, pulling weeds. Simple work. Peaceful work. Evelyn Blackwood moved slowly, carefully, her body showing every one of her 82 years. But her mind was clear, sharp, still processing, still analyzing, still teaching even when she was alone. She thought about the ceremony 6 months ago, the medal she had finally accepted, the visibility she had finally embraced. She thought about Mac, about the notebook she had passed on, about the 52 officers she had mentored over 14 years, about the thousands more who would learn from her lessons through them. She thought about James, her husband, who had died 38 years ago, about the family they never had, about the connections she had sacrificed for service. And she thought about legacy, real legacy, not monuments or medals or recognition, but knowledge passed on, wisdom compounded, each generation standing on the shoulders of the one before, building higher, seeing farther, accomplishing more. That evening her phone rang, unknown number. Commander Blackwood. Speaking. Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Sarah Chen. You don't know me, but I'm a student in Captain Harrington's class. She's teaching us your techniques, your methods, your stories. Evelyn sat down slowly. And, and I wanted to thank you for sharing them, for not letting them die with you. I'm the first person in my family to serve. My parents don't understand. But your story about proving yourself in Beirut, about being invisible, that helped me understand who I want to be. Tears in Evelyn's eyes. You're very welcome, Lieutenant. Stay safe. Trust your instincts. Learn from everyone. And when you're my age, pass it on to someone else. I will, ma'am. I promise. The call ended. Evelyn sat in her quiet apartment, alone but not lonely, not anymore, because her legacy was alive, growing, multiplying. 52 officers she had mentored directly, hundreds they would teach, thousands who would learn from them, knowledge that would outlive her, wisdom that would endure, lessons that would save lives long after she was gone. She picked up a pen, opened her own notebook, the one she kept for herself, and wrote final lesson, February 11, 2024, age 82. Legacy is not what you accomplish, it's what you enable others to accomplish after you're gone. I spent 50 years being invisible, then one day becoming visible, and in that visibility I found purpose I never had in shadows. Teaching is the ultimate service. Knowledge passed on is the only thing that truly never dies. Today, a young officer I never met called to thank me for stories I told 6 months ago that she learned from someone I taught one day. That's immortality, not living forever, but creating something that does. I am at peace. She closed the notebook, looked out her window at the Pacific Ocean, the sun setting over water that went on forever. Wraith had finally come home, not to an empty apartment, but to a legacy that would endure as long as people served, as long as wisdom mattered, as long as humanity needed understanding. And that was enough. That was everything.